Hey, what's going on, everybody? In this video, we're going to be doing my first book review of a book I received for free to review, and it's Dawn and Damnation by Clark Casey. And this is the first book in a series entitled Damnation. I was going to wait for the physical book to arrive in the mail, but after I started reading the digital version of the book, I just kept going because I thought it was pretty good. So I ended up reading it in way before the book came in the mail. So here we go. I'll just show you when I get it at some point, probably like next week. But anyways, this was a really fun read. It's portrayed as a paranormal western, so paranormal fantasy western. I think those are starting to become like a guilty pleasure read of mine, kind of like my Conan books. I read Six Gun Tarot not too long ago, picked this one up. I really enjoyed this one too. Basically, for this one, we have a sort of Wild West purgatory, basically, and it's a city or a little town called Damnation, where it's always sort of this dusky, twilighty little town, and it's completely surrounded by like a dust bowl, so you can't, if you try to leave the dust bowl, you just like end up walking in on the other side of town or something. So once you die in the Wild West, if you weren't really going to heaven, but you really weren't bad enough for hell, you end up in Damnation. So you have a bunch of crazy characters basically, and it's like the entire Wild West. You got like cowboys and gunslingers and farmers and miners and like lumberjacks and frontiersmen. You have all kinds of people. It's really cool, and they're all everyone's pretty rough and tumble. What I enjoyed a lot about this book is there's so many characters, and there's actually quite a few central characters. Sort of the main narrative is told to the point of Tom, who's like a lame-legged newspaper reporter. He's sort of like the local news guy, basically, of Damnation. But essentially, his newspaper, the majority of it is basically who died and who showed up. Because there's so many gunfights and there's so much brawling and killing going on. Because really, if you think about it, all you have is a bunch of guys with nothing to do who are basically from the Wild West, like gunslingers and cowboys and stuff. Give them basically nothing to do all day for pretty much all time, and basically you have a good recipe for lots of fighting going on. There's sort of like the local legend that if you can make it a whole year without shooting anybody, you'll probably get to go to heaven. But if you get killed or you get shot yourself, you go straight to hell. And that's sort of like the local lore and the laydown that everyone gets when they first show up in Damnation. And we have, like I said, we have a couple main central-ish characters. We have also a Buddy, a gunslinger, and we have sort of Sal, the like saloon owner. And basically, what changes everything up is when a woman comes to Damnation. Well, that's not like entirely unprecedented. She comes in as a pregnant woman, basically. So that has never happened before. Pretty much after she shows up, a lot of crazy stuff, even for Damnation standards, starts happening. So there was only a few things I didn't really care for in the book. One is, I know it's a Western, but there were so many similes and metaphors to make it like, Western-esque, I guess. Well, I don't mind some of it. I enjoy some of the hyperbole that makes it, kind of interesting and stuff. But there was just some parts of the book where there was just way too many like metaphors going on. I think there was like one paragraph that had 3 completely separate metaphors. I just felt that was a little bit too much. Just trying to create the whole like setting, I guess. One of the other things is a lot of like I said, there's a lot of characters which I like that are involved. However, there's a couple like characters or character groups in the book that didn't get that much attention, though they're alluded to frequently. One is the blacksmith. And it seemed kind of odd because he's sort of like one of the main focal points of the economy of Damnation, because he's the guy that makes bullets. So he seems like he'd be like a really important person to involve in the book, but he's sort of just like talked about every now and then. He's not really like actually in the narrative. And the other one is the Indian tribe that's in Damnation as well. Basically, you have the humans, the werewolves, yes, werewolves, and there's also one vampire. But they don't take complete over the whole storyline, so I didn't mind it too much. And the Indians, and they all kind of have their own little parts of town and their own. They stick to their own, but the Indians are not really in the book at all. They're just sort of referred to every now and then. Or I think this might change with the second book, which is Dead Indian Wars. So that might change a little bit. Besides that, there are a few loose ends, which normally I don't mind. But there's just a couple of things, I think more or less just because it's sort of like a purgatory setting. We're not going to get really many answers, though there are going to be more books in the series that'll probably flesh things out a little bit more. But yeah, that didn't bother me that much, to be honest. But let's go into some of the good stuff. Like I said, there's lots of cool characters. Like I said, I already mentioned Tom. We have Buddy, a gunslinger. And we have, there's, like I said, there's frontiersmen, and there's like cold-blooded killers, there's like other gunslingers, and like I said, when you get too many of these guys with basically nothing to do for all eternity except drink whiskey and basically gamble in the saloon, it's just a really good recipe, like I said, for having gunfights and brawls and slights that like happen. So I found that really interesting. I like the whole setting. So yeah, I did enjoy how there's not really a central protagonist to the whole story. There's several central figures that you're kind of like rooting for a little bit, but really there's not one single one that takes over the show. And their whole interactions with like the whole cast of characters is really interesting. I enjoyed that a lot. The author does do a good job making it like a very Western setting. Like I said, like it's a Wild West purgatory. Really interesting. I also had like there was a lot of supernatural elements. Like I said, there's a vampire and like some werewolves, and obviously it's like this weird purgatory thing where you can't like leave, or really you can't starve to death or anything like that, but you can still be killed. I like how all these supernatural elements sort of don't really take over. They're more just sort of like there, and they're fleshed out a little bit, but it's not, they definitely don't take over the whole story. Like you still feel like it's just like a natural-ish sort of Wild West purgatory place, if you can imagine that as a normal-ish place. So yeah, overall I really enjoyed the book. It's a pretty short read, but it was really fun. Basically, once I started, I just like kept going, and like I said, I finished it before the physical book came, so that's why we're doing the review now. But overall, I really enjoyed the book. The characters are really good. I like how there's not really a central, I wouldn't say there is a story arc, but like I said, there's not really a central hero, I guess you could say. There's like a whole cast of protagonists, I guess, like kind of doing their own thing, but also working together a little bit. I really enjoyed that. I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the series and see where it goes from here. So I'm going to give Dawn and Damnation a solid 4 out of 5 stars. And always remember, read victoriously.